our show, Brilliant Business Insights. This show solves your greatest business, leadership, and professional development challenges. We realize there isn't one solution to every problem, so we bring you proven strategies, best practices, and expert insights to get you, your business, and your employees where you want to go by removing the business stress.
The BS.
The BS.
Cut through all that stuff.
Exactly.
So one of the things I wanted to do today is I love this topic. So I'm really glad we're talking about it because my clients always come to me with this challenge. And it's whether you're managing up, whether you're trying to get strategies and ideas across, it's always the same issue. You know, I'm not being heard. How do I get people to hear me? Mm-hmm. How do I convey my message so it's taken seriously, or words that may or may not be able to be conveyed to somebody else,
right,
by speaking them.
Yes.
And so that's what we're diving into today is how can you be heard? How can you get your ideas across? And another stat I like to bring in is 92% there's a 92% retention rate. If information is conveyed in a relatable way to the individual through relevant examples or things that they're passionate about or interested in or knowledgeable about. And so that means only 8% of the info, if I'm just standing up there talking to you, if you're lucky, you're going to retain 8% of what I talk to you about. Ooh. And so that's why it's so critical to really connect to the listener, because if you're not connecting to the listener, you might as well be on mute.
Right.
You know, it's that wah, wah, wah. Right. And so there's a lot that goes into like knowing your audience and what is it with this person or this group of people I'm speaking to that's really going to make that connection and make this information stick to the point where they'll act on it or they'll retain it, or, you know, there's some action that can be derived from what you're saying.
Sure. Makes sense.
So we want to start out with the ramifications to not listening or not being heard. So there are a lot of things going on out there. There are endless missed opportunities, innovative ideas. I mean, I have clients telling me, you know, I had this fabulous strategy and the CEO didn't listen to me. And so he went with a different strategy and we spent all this time and money on it, like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then they went with my strategy. You know, why didn't they hear me the first time? After the fact. Wow. So they wasted all that time, the money, the resources just to wind up doing that strategy. And so then people go back to, why didn't they listen? Why didn't they hear me? You know, what can I do to be heard and really get people to pay attention to this fabulous stuff that I have to say?
Right. So that's our topic today. Do you hear me? Being heard at work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So some of the most common complaints that I remember from my corporate days, not saying they were my complaints, they might have been, but employees will say, like, my manager isn't listening to my strategy ideas, like you said, like, I'm being dismissed all the time. No one on my team listens to my ideas or opinions. You feel like you're minimized, or I feel like I'm talking to a wall. That may also happen in your personal life. Or, you know, I can never get a word in edgewise. So the being interrupted piece.
Yeah.
So what do you think we should share with the viewers in this segment?
Well, so what I think would be beneficial and what I think that the viewers would really appreciate in terms of the standpoint of being heard is the reasons you may not be heard.
Okay.
The ramifications to not listening and not being heard. And then the takeaway from today, I'd really like you to start being heard.
Yes.
And so what are some strategies so that I can be heard in those meetings, so that the board hears me, so that my boss hears me, so that, you know, my strategies can be utilized and benefited from?
Awesome. Well, you just heard from Lori Kuhn, and I'm Jen Fredericks with Thrive, a human development company. To learn more about us, please check out our website at thrivehdc.com. And behind the camera, we have John Taylor, our video and production guru with Milwaukee Video. They can be contacted at Milwaukee Video, mkevideo.com. And joining us later is our special guest today, Jay Olstad, who's an expert storyteller.
Ooh, I'm excited about that.
I am too.
Because I'm one of those people, and I think it's so critical to have that story in your head. Because I remember the story. I don't necessarily remember. I'm one of those visual, you talk to me and I create a vision in my head. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate that. So I'm super excited to hear what he has to say. But so when we talk about being heard, there are a lot of moving parts.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many. The way people receive information, the way people convey information is as diverse as the number of people that there are out there. And so every audience, every person receives it differently. So some people like, give me the cliff notes. Just give me the most important things. That's all I want to hear. And then other people are like, oh no, I need all the juicy details. Give me the whole context of everything. And it's interesting because I had a client one time where he wasn't into the finances. It was interesting because he was an investor. But his accountant would come in there like once a week, Monday, they'd sit down with all the financials and should spend an hour going through all this stuff. And he was like, I just want what the guys are doing. I want what they're selling. I want their numbers. I want to know what they have to get done for the week. Come in with that. And she'd sit down and go through the whole spiel every time. And she'd lose him. And so she'd spend all this time preparing all this information. He was like a deer in the headlights. And then all that time was wasted and he never got the information he wanted. And I'm like, why don't you tell her what you need?
Mm-hmm.
And then why don't you ask him how he wants to receive the information? It's a real easy fix.
Yes.
But for years they operated this way. And so there was this frustration and overwhelm and all these dynamics that went on because they didn't understand how. One, she didn't understand how to communicate what he was looking for, and she didn't ask what he needed. And two, he didn't ask her what he needed, and he just assumed that that's how the information came.
Oh, no.
And so there are a lot of assumptions going on in miscommunication and being heard and stuff. And so a lot of it's just getting clear. Right. And we'll dive into a lot of that later, getting clear on the message and what you want people to receive and how you want to be received.
Right. Because, the saying, when you assume, you make a out of you and me. You make a blank out of you and me. I'm not going to say it on the podcast.
Okay. So reasons you may not be heard. Mm-hmm. And here again, these are numerous, but a few of them that we just want to put out there are listeners don't feel they have the capability to do what's being asked for, or it's not relevant for them. Mm-hmm. So are you setting them up for success? So is what I'm talking about relevant to the individual? I can't tell you how many times I was sitting in a meeting. I used to say I'm in meetings to set up meetings.
Right.
And some of them it's like, do I need to be here? Like, why am I here? And so you're not going to be heard. And I didn't hear a lot of what was going on. Literally, I'd sit in the meeting and I'd have other stuff on my lap and I'd be doing other things, which we
You were one of those?
I was one of those because
Lori.
I didn't. You need to spell out why it's relevant for me to be there.
Yes. And what I do find refreshing is I think more and more organizations and corporations, and the last corporation I was with said if you don't have an agenda for the meeting and you can't send it out ahead of time, don't have the meeting. So I think some companies, organizations are becoming wise to that and understanding that listeners need to be set up for success. However, I never thought of it from that perspective.
Yeah.
It's my job. Like, no, I'm going in. I want them to understand what I'm saying. So I prepare me, but I never think of how I could prepare them.
Yeah. Well, because I've sat in numerous places going, can I excuse myself or is this relevant? Do I need to be part of this? Am I actually going to make an impact? Because I don't, back in my public accounting days, I used to have to account for every 6 minutes.
Wow.
And so each 6 minutes because we were billing the client. So it's like I had to be on my 6-minute game. And so there were times I would be in meetings and it was like, am I going to impact this meeting? Am I going to have impact in the result of this meeting? Do you need me here? Because I'm billable. I need to go be billable. I can't be sitting here because this is unbillable time for me.
Right.
And so I think that's what got me into that. If I can't contribute or make an impact or in some way be beneficial to this, then I need to remove myself or don't invite me. So it's that two-way street again.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
The other one is confident. So reasons you may not be heard is you may not be confident in sharing your ideas.
Right.
So there's a client of mine and she's a CFO, and they'll sit in their executive leadership meetings, and she'll talk, and she'll be like, well, I don't know if this is all there is to it, or, there may be more to this than meets the eye.
The qualifiers.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
man.
And so she discounts, and she puts a lot of time and research into it. Yeah. And so she goes in with these great ideas, and excuse me, but she knows her shit.
Right.
And so she'll go in there and discount her knowledge. And I'm like, you know this better than anybody. You're the knowledge base. You're the expert. Show up that way.
Right.
Or they're not going to take you that way.
Oh my goodness. That resonates so deeply with me back in my agency corporate days. I mean, the first job I had, I started out as an administrative assistant, worked my way up to account coordinator, then to account executive and account supervisor. And, I was there 8 years. Yet, even as a supervisor, if I needed to walk around and get signatures for a budget or sign off on something, I would meekly kind of tap on someone's door and, the body language of oh, yeah, sorry.
I don't want to interrupt you. Yeah.
And I would reintroduce myself every time. I don't know why I did that. I do know. I was not confident. I was not confident. Mm-hmm. And that's how it manifested for me. And of course, the people would kind of throw their head back or roll their eyes yeah, we know who you are, Jen. Oh, okay. Or I would do the qualifiers of, well, someone's probably already thought of this.
Yeah.
And then I'd share the idea, and then I'd kind of see that, oh, no one had thought of that yet.
Yeah.
But I still hadn't built the confidence in myself in those environments to be able to share in my full power.
Yeah. And so you're setting the stage. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying may not have value. What I'm saying may not be beneficial. What I'm saying may not be important or well supported. Mm-hmm. And instead, you could set the foundation for, no, I looked this up. I did my due diligence. This is solid information. And, connecting it to what you want to convey. And so when you're showing up that way, look, I researched the crap out of this. This is what I found. I think, these are my ideas as a result of my research. Yeah, absolutely.
It reminds me of what we talked about in one of our first episodes, where the brain looks to conserve energy. So what do we think would happen if we sit up there and we give these qualifiers of, oh, this isn't that important? I mean, do you feel that the person is going to fully pay attention and use their very, very valuable brain resources?
No, the listener checks out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. And so the other piece of that is, like we were just talking about, the message you're conveying isn't clear. You're not speaking their language.
Yeah, if you want to get a point across to me, if you bring in pop culture or music or musical theater, I'm there. I get it and I remember it. It sticks with me.
Right. So you don't want to bring in a diaper changing conversation to a group of 80-year-old men.
No.
It's going to fall on deaf ears. They're going to be like, what is going on here? And so, make sure you're speaking their language. You're using those analogies that mean something to them and that they'll connect with, and those things that they're passionate about. Again, checking in with how people receive the information, what's their best way of receiving it. And then the other one is lack of planning or prioritizing.
Yeah, if you don't have an agenda, do you need to have this meeting? Do you need to have this conversation?
Mm-hmm. Don't just, we need a meeting, invite these 5 people. And then whether or not they need to be there, they'll figure it out once they get there. Well, if half your audience, you're losing them, chances are you're going to start losing the rest of the audience based on what's going on. So some other reasons are workplace culture doesn't value or respect your ideas, unsure of what you really want to say, and you're not concise, kind of like me right now.
We're still listening.
We're still listening. That's the coffee kicking in.
Yeah.
Delivery. And then one of the things I always say is, if you want to be heard, you have to listen. Mm-hmm. And so I always say that if you want to be heard, you have to listen. It's that exchange.
It's to listen more than you speak.
Yes. Cool. And it's contextual.
Yeah.
Awesome.
For some other insights into how you can be heard at work, we're going to bring in our guest, Jay Olstad. Jay has spent nearly 25 years telling stories and teaching others how to tell theirs. He spent 18 years in broadcast news, finishing his career as a 5-time Emmy award-winning TV news reporter and anchor in Minneapolis. In 2017, he made the transition into corporate marketing as a content creator, video producer, and writer, being recognized with several Telly and Communicator awards for his work. When not in Minnesota, what does he do? Well, he travels. He travels the country as a keynote speaker, showing professionals and students how to tell their best story. Hi, Jay.
Hi, Jay.
Welcome.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Oh,
Really
we're so
excited.
We're excited to hear about your insights on Do You Hear Me? Being heard at work. So, what are the secrets to being heard?
Well, it's interesting because many of the things that you were talking about, I was nodding profusely. So many great tips there and so many great reasons why people aren't heard, don't feel like they're heard. Obviously, there's so many situational things that go into that. But the two things that I've discovered over my career of the reason why people aren't hearing me, hearing the videos or the messaging that I'm giving them, it really comes down to two things. One, people don't know their story. They don't know how to find their story, or if they think they have their story in hand, this is what I'm going to present, it's not the right story. That's one. Number two is they don't know how to tell their story. So there's the finding and the telling. And what I tell people often that helps you hone that in, besides some of the tips that I provide, is really knowing who's your audience and why should they care. Every single time you're going to communicate, whether it's through verbal, whether writing, whether it's at a meeting or some sort of marketing plan, whatever it is, you need to be asking yourself, who's my audience and why should they care? To your point earlier, speak their language. The moment you start speaking your language and it's not theirs, they will tune out.
Very true. I love that. The what's in it for me, but the me being them. What's in it for them is a very important thing to keep in mind. And even, I come from a marketing background. So as you're even looking to speak to your ideal client or customer, we have all of these industry terms and everything that we use to go out into the marketplace with things. And they're kind of like, what does that even mean? So tuning into your audience and customer and speaking their language.
And do you have any tips for or strategies for how do you know what their language is?
Yeah. Well, the most obvious is ask, and to your point about if you want to be heard, you really need to be a good listener. And to me, part of communication, that tool that I talk about is storytelling. That's a great tool. In order to be a good storyteller, the foundation has to be curiosity, being curious. I have you can't see it, but a Post-it note here that hopefully you can read this, that I look at every day. Get to curious. In anything I'm doing, whether I'm trying to figure out for a video that I'm producing, what's the messaging, who's the audience, what do they go through every day, I'm always trying to be curious and really be open to what's coming at me, all the stories. So essentially, that I look at it at two ways, two things that, as I mentioned before, the finding and the telling of a story. Before I get to that, though, the research shows that storytelling works. And when I say storytelling, I don't talk about, so often I think people think, especially in business, it's I'm sitting down reading a story to my kids, or it's something an author does. But once you figure out the formula of storytelling, whether it's in a movie, a commercial, a presentation, it is all the same. They use the same tactics, the same things to get you to not only pay attention, but to remember. And that's what the science tells us about storytelling. There was a study that came out decades ago in the 60s, which is why I still use it, because it still stands the test of time. And they said that if you wrap a fact around a story, it's 7 times more memorable. Consider that. Your idea, your product, your fill in the blank, 7 times more memorable. And what they did is they had students on one side who memorized just facts, and then students on another side who memorized those facts through a narrative. And those students who memorized it through a story held it, remember it. And the reason being for me is, if you want people to do something, you got to make them feel something first. And that's where storytelling comes in. So, to answer your question, to me, there are 2 ways to do that. One, you got to find your right story. You, anyone can find a story that they think resonates, but you got to find the right story. Then you got to tell it in the right way. So the right story is an acronym that I teach people. It's RITE. R is relatable. Is it relatable? I is it impactful? And T, is it timely? Those 3 equals the E, effective stories, the right story. So, is it relatable? Is it something your audience can relate to? Speaking that language we talked about earlier. Is it impactful? Is it something that can help them? Is it something that will solve something for them? Is it impactful to them? And then finally, is it timely? Is it on the top of their mind? Is it something that's happening right now that then you can talk to? That, to me, if you can find those 3 things, is the right story. Now, there are other things, no question. There are other things, other elements that create a great story. Like, is it new? Is it unique? Is it different?
Mhm.
But it can't just be that, because if it's just unique, if it's just new, but it doesn't relate to our client or your boss, if it's not impactful for your boss, if it's not timely for your boss, it doesn't matter. So that's the finding part. And then
Well,
there's
that's
the telling, which I can
the
get into
telling.
later.
That's what, Lori, you were mentioning earlier with one of your clients who it could have been very important for him to hear some of the information his coworker was bringing to him, but because it wasn't relatable to him, it didn't stick.
Mhm.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at, finding, telling, and then write, RITE, which one of those do people not have that prevents them the most from not being heard?
Well, let me talk a little bit about the telling part, because I
Please.
think that's where people fall short. And I call it the FMCs. So, okay, you've got the story, you've got the message that you want to go into this meeting, you want to tell your boss, to whomever. Now you got to tell it. And I call it the FMCs: focus, moments, characters. Focus, moments, characters. You need to have those 3 things. And so often, what I think people miss in anything is they don't have a strong focus. It's all over the place. Have you ever been to a movie or read a book and you're confused, you're overwhelmed, there's just too much coming at you and it doesn't fit, it's unfocused. And that's where I find people really miss out. So how do you become focused in your messaging? Break it down into a sentence, into a headline. What is this story about, and why should I care?
Mhm.
Who did what? Really, that's what I do when I'm producing a video, when I'm going into a meeting, when I'm asking for a raise. I'm doing all those things, but specifically saying, well, what's my focus? What in a sentence is this about? And then what that does is it provides your audience and you with a roadmap. For you specifically, it helps you be much more efficient in when you're gathering and you're writing and you're trying to figure out what I'm going to say. Because then when you're grabbing facts and figures and so many other things, you match it up against that sentence. Does it fit that sentence? Does it fit that focus? If it doesn't, get rid of it. If it's so good, if you're saying, man, this fact that I found, this figure has to be included in my presentation, but it doesn't fit your focus, then you might need to reframe your focus. But
Got
focus is the foundation of everything. It's the scaffolding that everything is upon which is built. Then there's the moments, those moments. Every good book, every good story, every good video commercial has them. They're what I call the a piece of candy moment when you're walking on the street and you, oh, a piece of candy. Oh, here's a piece of candy. And it keeps going. It keeps you moving.
Yes.
Those are moments. It could be something as simple as a self-deprecating joke that goes back to your focus. Always has to relate to your focus. Could be
Right.
something as simple as that, or it could be something big, like a big surprise, like Luke, I am your father type of surprise, and everything in between. It's those moments that keep your audience attention. But once those moments are over, your story has to end. Have you ever been to a movie where it's great, but the last 20 minutes you're looking at your watch like, is this over yet? They ran out of moments. And then finally, characters, people. This is super, super important. I was talking to a data analyst who were saying their presentations to their management just weren't sticking. We had a lot of great information, but they weren't getting it. What they forgot was behind those numbers are people. Behind those numbers are people. You need people, characters, whether that character is you or someone else that people can look at, can relate to, can understand and say, hey, that's me, or that's my neighbor, or my mom's like that. That helps you remember the content much better.
I love that you say that, Jake, because I just went to this conference from this woman at SoFi, and it was a 2023 economic outlook. And so she was bringing in a lot of stats and a lot of numbers, and a lot of people there weren't numbers people. But the way she conveyed it, she started out with how she got there. She started out with her personal life and how it evolved into this financial presence that she now has. And she could have taught us, advanced accounting, and we would have all been engrossed because of the way she was conveying the information. She was just that good at it.
Wow.
And it was all just bringing it to the, like you said, that personal level. She got us all engaged personally, and then started bringing in the information and the more financial numbers.
I love that, the humanity, humanity under it all.
Right.
Which is what we talk about a lot in almost every concept or strategy that we bring forth.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's so important. And I've seen those type of speakers too. And I hope that I'm one of those, but I've seen really great speakers and they always start off with a hook, something to grab your attention. And oftentimes that can be a story. Again, the story has to relate to their topic in some form or fashion, but a story, especially when the content is dense, it's complicated, it's number driven. If you can tell a story, man, oh man, people will listen and you will discover doors opening that you didn't even know were there because you're a great storyteller.
Nice.
Very cool. But I was going to also ask you, what are some easy storytelling principles to ensure that your message is received or retained? And you already went through some of those. But if viewers wanted to take something from this segment and put it into practice today, what would be the easiest one for them, do you think, to move forward on? Okay.
What you want to say. And it goes back to that question that I posed earlier and the same similar question that you asked as well as who is my audience and why should they care? If there's nothing else that you take from this, it should be that. You should always be thinking about your audience, not about you, but about your audience. And then once you start becoming a good storyteller, you can flip that, of course, to make sure you are heard, of course, but that they are also receiving that message. So if you're going in to any presentation thinking about, well, this is what I would like, and not asking, well, what would they like, you're going to miss out.
So true.
I like that.
I do too.
That's critical.
What's floating around in my head right now is WIIFT. What's in it for them?
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Jay.
And also remember thinking, if you want someone to do something, they got to feel it first. They have to feel it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that with anything. If you're watching a movie, listening to music, like you were saying, listening to a speaker, whatever it is, you want to feel something. It's that feeling that keeps you connected and engaged and wanting more. And
Hmm.
it's the feeling that you take with you and you remember also. So when you leave, you don't necessarily remember the words, but you remember the feeling.
Right. And
Yeah.
how many people actually know to put that into practice in the workplace?
Yeah.
That would, like, if I had days like that where I went into meetings and there was focus and the person who put together the meeting was thinking what's in it for me and
Mhm.
wrapped it in some sort of personal or relatable story, I'm going to go to work all the time.
Yeah, and be productive.
Yes.
So when you leave that meeting and someone's inspired you to action without really doing anything, you just because of this meaningful, infusing conversation, you're just like, you have all this energy and momentum. It's like, let's go do something, let's go accomplish something.
Right.
So there's a lot in that.
Hmm.
A lot of value.
Exactly.
Well, Jay, please let viewers know how they can get in touch with you to learn more about how you help people tell their best story.
Yes. Well, I have a website. It's
Okay.
jolstad.com. You can find out more information there. And my email is jay, at jolstad.com.
Awesome. Thank you. And we'll go ahead and we'll put that in the description of the podcast as well so that people can know exactly how to reach out to you and get some more of these very important insights.
Yes.
Thank you so
Well, thank
much.
you so much for having me.
It was great.
Thank you, Jay.
I absolutely love
Everything.
Everything.
I wanted to take notes as
I
he
know.
was talking. I was sitting here like, would it look bad if I just sat here writing and I'm like, oh, I can watch the video?
Well, I hope not, because I was writing things down because I wanted to bring some things back as before we move forward into some of ours. But I mean, just the get to curious prompt. We speak about that a lot when we ask people to, stay away from judgment and be curious about yourself, about your feelings, about others, about a situation. So to have that wrapped into this is one way that you can be heard more at work. I mean, who would think of
And
that?
it's our powerful questioning.
It is powerful
Yeah,
questioning
so
and coaching.
that's part of that curiosity. Yeah.
I love that was one of the things that like immediately I wrote down, and then a lot of the other acronyms that he has. But the do something, feel something.
Yeah.
If you want someone to do something, make them feel something.
Yeah. And I liked his focus too. And we talk about that in terms of intention. What's your intention? Because that becomes your anchor. And like he was saying, just bounce it up against your focus, your one sentence that you create. And does it fit in with this? Right. And so it's so important to have that intention before you go into those communications, because that becomes your anchor. That becomes when you go off the rails or things, the conversation's getting sidetracked, you can bring it back to your intention.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of going off the rails.
What the crap?
What the crap?
We're at our What the Crap segment. And today's What the Crap is the storms in Wisconsin.
Oh my
gosh. It's interesting because Jay's in Minnesota, and I think they're supposed to get like 20 feet of snow or something.
Yes, an incredible amount.
Yeah, they usually get a lot of it. Here, we're under some advisory soon, but what I always say to people in Wisconsin, if you don't like the weather, wait a few seconds and it'll change 30 degrees, because that's what we deal with here. So we're happy to be in the studio. We're happy we made it here safely.
Very. And
we're interested to see what unfolds when we leave.
Exactly. Even what unfolds here in the rest of the episode.
Right.
So maybe we should look at our focus or setting the intention for how we would like to experience whatever it is when we leave.
So your takeaways for today, and what we really would like you to hear, and we really would like you to benefit from, is being heard.
Yes.
Yes. And so start us out with being heard. If I want to be heard, Jay had a lot of fabulous things, and absolutely I'm going to go back and replay that until it's emblazoned in my brain.
Well, I think one of the most important pieces of advice I've gotten throughout my career is, well, they didn't say it this way, but like being where my feet are and actually being present in the dialogue or communication with the other person. Because if you are present and you are fostering presence and cultivating presence, then you're actually listening to what the other person is saying instead of thinking like, oh, this is what I would say, or this is how I am going to respond, or just listen.
Yeah.
So that's if you are the receiver of the information. If you are the presenter of the information, like, don't be distracted. Stay on your focus. At the moment, demonstrate that you're committed only to the conversation that you're having right then.
But wait. See, I just interrupted you.
But at least you didn't pick up your phone. Like, be a distracted communicator that way or listener that way.
So how do you not be distracted if someone else is vying for your attention? Just like I did.
Oh my goodness. You're right, because now I'm discombobulated.
Right.
I'm going to have to recombobulate.
And that happens all the time during conversations.
All the time.
Yeah.
I would think my first instinct and my first piece of advice would be, I always pause. I practice the pause to come back to myself so I can be exactly where I am and be where my feet are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that because, you know, I know this happens to me and I see it happening to others. We have like this wow moment. And so information was conveyed, or I have an idea and I'm sitting in a meeting and it's like, oh, I have this aha moment, this hit of enlightenment. And I'm like, oh, I gotta share it because I gotta share it before I forget it, or I gotta share it because it's just so good. But my wow moment isn't everybody else's wow moment. But because it's so insightful to me and because it inspired me so much, I'm excited to share it with everybody because I want them to have that moment too.
Right.
And so it's hard to contain that when you're in a conversation and you're trying to be present and listen, but the heavens just opened and the angels descended upon me and they plunked this information in my head and I have to say it now.
So what do you do?
What do you do? You sit there, what most people do is they sit there, hurry up, finish talking so I can say this, or you know,
Yeah. Well,
or they nod, yeah, I get what you're saying, I get what you're saying. Okay,
it's my turn.
Right.
I guess I would lean into trust.
Yeah.
That it would remain with me and that it would be most beneficial for those who it applies to if I wait.
So what are your thoughts about writing it down? Like, so what if we're in a conversation and something comes to me and off to the side, I'm still paying attention. Some people would say I wouldn't be able to do that, but as a coach, we get very skilled at that. To the point where some people are like, I'm impressed that you're that engaged and taking notes, because it's almost like you get to a point where you can unconsciously write, like your hand's writing and you don't have to think about it. But so what are your thoughts about that? Like, we're in a conversation and I'm writing some things.
Well, I guess I would acknowledge the fact that I am doing something that may look like I'm distracted, but I'm actually not. So it's being like a respectful listener and saying, okay, I just want to let you know. I say it a lot in sessions too. Like, I want you to know that this is about you. I'm paying attention to you, and I may take some notes time to time.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So I do that. What do you do?
The same thing.
Okay. Well, then why did you ask me? I'm glad we were able to share that with everyone. But what do you do to make sure that you have the listener's undivided attention?
I do different things.
Okay.
Sometimes especially if it's a group of people. So I know there have been times I've been doing team alignment strategies and everybody's walking in and they're carrying all their stress in. So they're on their phones, they're sitting there, they're wrapping stuff up, they're checking other things, and then I'll stand there for a minute and I'll be like, okay, take care of your last text, finish up your last text. We're going to start in 2 minutes. Sit down, breathe, put your feet on the ground, connect to the earth. Take some deep breaths, let go of, so I kind of preface it, let go of what you carried in here. Let's all focus. We want to start, re-engaging and bringing our presence in this room. So I actually have like a whole format of what I do to just start releasing what you're carrying in and just coming.
So that you can be present, so that your focus is there. You are able to create that space for people to bring their whole selves instead of being scattered and discombobulated. Yeah.
With my husband, I have to do this.
I do that with my daughter all the time too, but it was more like, I'm watching you.
It's like, yeah, I'll be talking and he does 50 things while you're talking. So I'm always like, right. Right. And then when I get the look, then I'll talk. And then once he goes rogue, then I'm back at.
Well, so it sounds like when you're able to bring people into a space and have them release some of the other things, that you're taking the time to create psychological safety.
Yes.
For those moments that you're spending with them. So why is that important in being heard?
Well, people, if they don't feel safe, don't convey ideas.
Oh, okay.
So if I'm in an area, and I see this with a lot of my clients, if the bosses are in there.
Yes.
They don't always speak up if certain people are in the room. Or if they...
That's true.
Yeah. Or if they feel they're going to be shot down, or their idea isn't going to be taken seriously, or they haven't been heard in the past, that's a great indicator that they're not going to, that they won't speak up in the future. And so...
So I was just going to say, so as a communicator, it's very important then to set that stage before you actually launch into...
Yeah, to make sure it's a safe place to be heard and convey information. So again, it's that two-sided thing. Yeah.
Cool. So we were going to talk a little bit about, I'm excited about this, being an experiential communicator or having a part in experiential communication. Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, so when I talk about experiential communication, one is to know your listener.
Like Jay had mentioned.
Yeah. And so there are other aspects of that. Some of the other bullets that we'd like to talk about on the next are to make sure they're listening. Yeah. Make sure they're not like, have you ever had a conversation? I had a neighbor who's infamous for this. Like, she did this all the time. And there are certain people out there that do that. I'm like, oh, it's one of these people. But you're sitting there and you're having a conversation with them. And they're like, someone will walk by. Or they'll look down at their coffee, or something else will go on. And literally, the conversation is like this.
They want to be anywhere but there is what it feels like.
Right.
Yes.
And it's a conversation they bring up. And so when they're conversing, they're sharing and sharing and sharing, but they'll ask you a question, and the minute you respond, and you're like, you just want to go, wah, wah, wah.
Just see if they're paying attention. Yeah, I used to have a coworker who would ask something, or we'd be communicating about a project, but the person would look around everywhere else but here. I was like, what, are you looking for a better idea? Or like, why are you not invested in this project? So what do you need to do to make sure that you are being a good listener? Or if someone is not being a good listener, how do you bring them back?
Well, if someone's not being a good listener, I'll usually ask a question. Do you want to hear this? Or can I convey this in a way that would be more meaningful to you? So I'll go there.
Yeah. Just like flat out, hey,
yeah,
I'm going to lay this down.
Yeah. Like, I mean, in any context, but I remember having a conversation with my daughter the other day, and I'm like, you don't care about this, do you? And she's like, nope. And I'm like, okay, perfect, we're done. I appreciate that.
Right.
It's like, fabulous, let's move on. And so even in a work environment, if you don't feel this is relevant to you, or you don't want to hear this, great, let's be done. Yeah. But like my other example with my friend, don't ask me the question and then tune out.
Right.
Because if you're not going to listen to the answer, and this is oftentimes happens in work all the time. A boss will come in and they're in a hurry. Hey, did you get that report done? Or did you finish this project? And then they're off as you're responding, and you're like, did you want to hear the answer to that question?
So you mentioned being able to ask a question to re-engage. And then also, how can you ensure that you are being heard by that other person?
Ask them, did you understand what I said? Or what did you understand about what I said?
Yes, I love that.
It's the reiteration piece. And so that when they articulate it, and this is so critical, especially in business between leadership and managers and employees, it is so critical to have that reiteration piece so they understood you the way you wanted it conveyed. Because so often, did you get that? Did you understand me? Yeah, I did. And then they go off and do something different.
It's like
and
the
you're
game of telephone.
Yeah.
Where it completely changes. Right.
And you're like, that's not what I told you. Well, yeah, you did. Because you don't get the reiteration. So what did you understand me to say? And not that you have to do this all the time, but if it's something critical or something that hasn't been understood in the past, getting that reiteration, you get to hear their understanding of it and then see if what you conveyed is how they took it. So now I get to hear how you took it.
And then you can clarify if needed.
Right, if needed. Right. Otherwise, absolutely perfect. Yep, we're on the same page. Let's move forward.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, should you have those types of conversations in like, a work hallway?
No.
No, but they happen all the time.
I know. And this is the psychological safety piece. Depending on, everything's contextual in conversations, the appropriate people. So is the setting. Don't be in the hallway talking about mergers and acquisitions. I mean, they're just those times to have those conversations. And, there was a client of mine who she's not comfortable confronting the CEO. And sometimes he likes that confrontational style. That's not her style. So I'm always like, would it benefit you to, after the meeting, go have a conversation with them? Have you tried something like that? And she's like, no, I should really do that. I should just let it go. But yet it'd be, critical, strategic information that she would need to share with them. Yeah. And so it was a strategy she started. Instead of having the conversation or acknowledging or not acknowledging what he was saying, afterwards she'd be like, can we meet and just go through this again? Because she needs time to process it. She needs time to think about it.
Okay. So I hear you saying that you're able to create an experience.
Right. Okay. And in part of that creating the experience is exactly what Jay said. So you want to create an experience so they hear you.
Yes.
You want to create an experience so they remember you and your message. And you want your message to prompt them into action, thought, or deeper engagement in the conversation. And so all of those things that Jay talked about in storytelling help do this.
Yeah.
And so this is, especially in a business context, most of our conversations you want to prompt into action or into deeper thought or into deeper engagement.
Cool. And what if you are trying to read your audience?
So this goes into what Jay was saying about know how your audience likes to receive information, know their language. And I asked him the question, how do you do that? Well, some of it is the experiential listening piece. It's, are you tuned into them? So like, am I watching your body language? If you're sitting there and you're kind of looking up like you're in thought, well, then I know you're not engaged. Or like I was talking about my friend who's looking around, just like, yeah, wah, 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 at that point. Body language. Do they seem like they're open to receiving, or do they seem closed up, or do they seem like they're trying to hide, or, or what's going on in their body that as a speaker, if I want to be heard, I can start reading. Like maybe I need to adjust what I'm saying or how I'm saying it to really get this across. One of the examples I use is my econ teacher, 7:30 in the morning. Would lay on the podium and talk about econ like this. Sometimes he'd raise his pencil. That was super exciting when he raised his pencil. But all my notes, like it's me writing and lines going off the page because I was falling asleep. He could have looked at us and determined we were not paying. Our focus was trying to stay awake in that minute.
Yeah.
And so as I'm speaking, if I want to be heard, start reading those signals and then asking. So if I see someone not paying attention, is this interesting to you, or am I conveying this in a manner that you're understanding? So it prompts those questions so that I can re-engage them if I'm losing them, if I'm not being heard.
Cool. What do you think about when Jay was speaking about focus? And I know we share this sometimes. When going into a communication, it's important to have a clear intention for it. Yes, having an agenda, having a topic that you'd like to focus on, but should you look at how you want the communication to unfold, how you want it to go? Like, should you look that far down the road, or should you just like stay right in the moment? Like, this is my focus, this is who I'm talking to, and go.
And I look at my intention as how I'm showing up.
Okay.
So I know and I say that because how I want it to go, the results of the meeting, I want to show up in that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I combine that with how I'm showing up. I combine that with confidence. I combine all of this in my intention because I'm excited about, you know that. I get excited about things and I'm blah. So I need to get better at storytelling. I need to get better at conveying things more clearly and succinctly because I know I have that ability to get excited and then I just want to share. And so my intention is always the feeling. How do they want to feel? And it was like Jay was saying, it's the feeling. So it's conveying that feeling. So that's tied up in my intention.
And so that reminds me that communications are an energetic exchange.
Mm-hmm.
It's an energetic exchange. And we talk about energy a lot at Thrive. Like, even where you don't think we can bring up energy, we're bringing up energy. So how you show up is communication is an energetic exchange.
Yes.
So it's always, I'm always wondering, like, are they picking up what I'm laying down? Not only through my words, but also through, like, when I would go and meekly knock on the door, and well, of course the person would be picking up on the energy, like, oh, maybe this isn't so important, so I don't really need to pay attention that much. However, if I would come with empowerment and urgency and confidence, they would most likely really take part in what I was asking them. So
yeah, and I like the energetic exchange piece because some people are like, and people have actually said this to me. Well, we're virtual. That doesn't.
No.
I mean, you watch a movie, you get sad. You feel the energetic exchange, whether you're virtual or in person.
Yes.
And so, yes, you need to pay attention to that regardless of whether you're in person or whether you're virtual.
Yeah, when we were talking to Jay, I could feel his passion for storytelling coming through the screen.
Oh, me too. I was excited. Yeah.
And part of that was, the body language. Like you said, your econ professor who like laid on the podium and talked like this. But like Jay he was so excited, and he was, up in the camera and sharing from his passion to help people really get their point, be heard.
Yeah.
To be heard.
It's your tone. It's all of that. Yes, absolutely.
Very cool. So is there a piece that we're missing to being heard?
What usually comes up? We always say energy always comes up. What else always comes up when we talk?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so if you guys really need to know what's important to Thrive, one is energy, another is love, showing up in love, and the other is personal responsibility.
And so personal responsibility, if you just don't get what someone's talking about, say it. I just don't get what you're talking about. Like I said earlier, I'm in a meeting. Do you really need me here?
Right.
I mean, you have to take personal responsibility. So often our boundaries, our intention, everything gets put on the wayside because I'm stuck in this situation and I can't leave this meeting now. What would it look like?
Right.
But so there's so much that goes into being heard and expressing yourself. And like I said with my friend, have the conversation with your boss later. Take the personal responsibility. You want to be heard, have the conversation. If it doesn't happen then, have it later. It's set a boundary, establish a process for communication. So this one client I'm currently working with, his boss is so busy he can't find time. But if you establish that process, like any routine you have in your workday or your personal routine, you do it, you follow the process. Make the communication a process. Every Monday at 9:00, we're going to go into an environment that's conducive for our conversation, and we're going to spend a half an hour, and we're going to talk about what we need to talk about for the week. So every Monday, this is what you do. Now, not only have you have an environment for it, but you've set the energy, you've set the stage, the intentions there. Everybody knows what's going to transpire. You know you're going to be productive. And so establishing the process, people don't usually think of that, but I think that's very important. And then what we've talked about already is getting clarification. Does everyone understand the information? if you have to and you're in a group, look at each person. Do you understand your part? Does it make sense to you? How did you receive it? And just go around the room and, even if you don't have time to get the verbal, look at everyone and at least get the nod or something. Or the finger.
I hope not. I mean, come on, we're setting up a space for psychological safety and being
and love at work.
Exactly. And what happens if, we talked about setting up a space, a safe space to talk, establishing psychological safety. What happens when you're ambushed in the hallway? And this happened all the time. And I think a lot of people did it because they thought it showed that they were being productive all of the time, even when they're walking. Yeah. Like they go by someone and they're like, oh, hey, I wanted to ask you about that. Blah, blah, blah. And the person's coming back from the bathroom. Like, not in the headspace to answer that question for you. So how can you set the stage for a lifetime communication like that?
What you said was brilliant.
Okay.
I'm not in the headspace to have that conversation.
Do you see where it's coming from?
Really? Now.
Yeah.
But you mentioned it earlier, take the pause. Mm-hmm. And so you take the pause to create space, to ground yourself, to realign and regroup, to think, is this the right context to be having this conversation? Should I even be having this conversation with you? Am I the right person?
Right. We're talking about mergers and acquisitions in a hallway.
Right.
I don't think I want to be held responsible for
any of that.
Yeah. So remove yourself from the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. And so, I mean, it all, like we say, it all ties back into that personal responsibility piece. Mm-hmm. If you want to be heard, do what you need to do to be heard. Set people up for success. Mm-hmm. If you want people to listen to you, listen to them. It's that whole reciprocation of communication.
Okay. Well, and so what I also hear in that is something that I really took away from the book that I brought in today for the book segment, which is Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson, Joseph Grenny, Ron McMillan, and Al Swisler. And it's right here. I read this when I was in my corporate days, and there were a couple things that I really enjoyed with this book. And the one that I wanted to call out that I think wraps up what we were just talking about a little bit is, are candor and kindness in communication mutually exclusive? So they told a really great story in this book about a guy named Kevin who he was like one of the top performers in this company, and their researchers, they were going around trying to figure out, how is he a top performer? What does he do that's different from other people? And he was in a meeting where the CEO, they were talking about moving their headquarters, and everyone had their idea. The CEO had his idea, and he was really railroading people with it. Mm-hmm. And no one spoke up. Everyone was ending up agreeing with them. And Kevin, makes me also think of the Minion when I say Kevin. I know. But Kevin from Crucial Conversations, not Minions, was able to somehow engage the CEO from a non-defensive place and have the idea heard, and asked him to reconsider if what he was proposing would benefit everyone. And a coworker turned around to the researchers and said, if you want to know how people are top performers or how he does what he does, figure out what he just did there. Huh. And what they figured out was that he was able to combine candor, truth, and kindness in a way that was respectful, to have people listen and take action from there. So that's what I really appreciated from this book, as well as one of their chapters is called Start with Heart. And you know me, if you can start anywhere, I say start from heart and love. so this book really drove that home for me.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And it reminded me of Dare to Lead that we brought in the last episode.
Yes.
She brings a lot of those concepts in too, and they're hugely beneficial for conversations and being heard. And
well, so speaking of this episode, what do you recommend viewers take away and start practicing from today? What stood out?
Well, a few things stood out. I like the focus, like Jay said, that, having that clear intention.
Yeah.
And I think the other piece I would say is your personal responsibility in the conversation.
Right.
Just really showing up in your confidence and being clear in your intention and a lot of those things we talked about.
If I would have had this knowledge back in my corporate days, I would have showed up very differently. I would have had much more confidence in myself to speak up during meetings, and also to ensure that people were actually hearing me, because I would know that I'm allowed to ask. Like,
Yes.
Here's your permission to ask. Are you hearing me? Reiterate. What did you get from that? Those are all very important pieces, I think.
Yes.
But one thing that I think is most important to remember is that you have permission to pause.
Yeah.
You can take time. You don't have to answer right away. And I think that's a very important piece in being heard.
And part of that too is the white space. So as you said that, what it brought to my mind is if you create white space, people speak up. Like it's the pause, but it's a pause for everybody to kind of recombobulate and regain their footing and figure out, do I want to speak up now? Is what I'm ready to say invaluable? And as a leader and as someone who wants to be heard, I can look around and identify it in that white space, what I'm getting from the person. And so often I've been in meetings where someone will be like, Lori, what are you thinking about? And I'm like, why in the heck did they call on me? But I was just processing, and they read that in me.
Right.
And so you can do that in white space.
That's one thing I really appreciate about coaching sessions and creating a space for coaching sessions, is also letting the person that I'm coaching know, like, I'm good with white space.
Yeah.
Sometimes white space is where the most brilliant insights happen. When there's not all of this stimulation coming at us, when we're just able to sit and be and listen to ourselves.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thanks to our guest today, Jay Olstad, and to John Taylor with Milwaukee Video. We appreciate all you do for us here, John. He's a master at this. I come in and I'm always in awe of. I get excited every time I walk in here.
Super fun.
Yes. Thanks to my co-host, Jen.
Oh, thank you, Lori. Thank you.
Yeah.
So join us next time for Brilliant Business Insights, getting you where you want to go, feeling the way you want to feel, and being who you want to be by removing the BS.
Yes. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
And cut.